All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for all being here. We're glad you joined us for Sisters in Arms, Kappas in the Military. From the American Civil War through World War I, World War II, and the Korean War, countless women answered the call to serve their country, embodying a legacy of courage and patriotism that has been long overlooked.
Now, we know there are lots of Kappas either currently serving or maintaining the stability of their military families, but because this is historically speaking, we're not covering anything that's contemporary. Sisters in Arms is a program that celebrates the trailblazers, recognizing not only the individual women who took up uniform, but also the powerful contributions of our sisterhood during conflict. While women were barred from formal military enlistment for much of this period, they nonetheless served on the front lines, behind the scenes, and on the home front.
Though they married in 1876, more than a decade after the end of the American Civil War, our founder, Sue Walker, was a military spouse. Her husband, the Reverend Alvin Stewart Vincent, was a captain in Company K of the 50th Regiment of the U.S. Colored Infantry. We knew the least about Sue and her family, but many of the details we do have were filled in when Julie and John Mangus did some genealogy research for us and found Reverend Vincent's military pension records.
Kappa was founded in 1870, so while the American Civil War had ended, our founders and early members were, of course, impacted by the conflict. Most were too young to take an active role in the support efforts, but a Kappa from DePauw, who was initiated at the age of 58 as an honorary member, played a big role in supporting the war effort. Mary Livermore, invited to join IOTA chapter at DePauw in 1879, was a nurse and volunteered as a member of the U.S. Sanitary Commission. She helped organize aid societies, visited Army posts and hospitals, and in organizing the Northwestern Sanitary Fair in Chicago in 1863, she raised $86,000 for the war effort. She even successfully lobbied for President Lincoln to donate his own copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, which was auctioned off for $10,000.
Jumping now to the First World War, the Canadian Kappas of Beta Psi chapter at Toronto were the first to become involved in war relief related work in 1914. Both collegians and alumni knitted and rolled bandages and worked tirelessly in newly created jobs for women in factories, offices, and on farms. When the United States entered the war in April of 1917, many more thousands of Kappas volunteered with groups such as the Red Cross and YMCA, or YWCA, and engaged in work efforts similar to those of their Canadian sisters.
Most notable of all the during this time, however, was fraternity sponsorship of the work of member and noted author Dorothy Canfield Fisher from the Beta Nu chapter at Ohio State. Much of her work focused on alleviating the suffering of war-scarred children in Bellevue, Moudon, a Paris suburb where she lived with her husband and 2 young children. Unfettered by the red tape of most organizations, Dorothy was able to direct Kappa's generosity where most needed and in ways that benefited the children both physically and emotionally. For example, arrangements were made for children who lived in squalid, cramped quarters to spend up to 60 days by the sea. The Kappa French Relief Project, started by Dorothy, had such a lasting impact that the town hall of Bellevue, Moudon, was graced with a bronze plaque reading simply Kappa Kappa Gamma. And efforts did not end with the war. For 20 years, Kappas continued to give food and toys to the children of France. Eventually, the Red Cross took over the work that Kappa had begun.
And jumping still further ahead, Kappa Kappa Gamma was a force of tremendous strength, as shown in the variety of services provided, work accomplished, and lives touched during World War II. At a time when war invaded the lives of virtually every member, the fraternity exponentially built upon the effort and presence members exerted during the previous World War. At the end of 1940, before the United States even entered World War II, the fraternity had organized its Army-Navy Alumni Association to enable Kappas and their military families in unfamiliar places to meet one another. In 1942, after the United States officially entered the war, the association expanded in all directions. offering hospitality and a lifeline not only to Kappa wives, but service husbands, brothers, and sons. The advent of women's branches of the service in the early 1940s served to increase membership of the association as Kappa joined the armed forces, beginning military lives all over the world. Members of the Red Cross and similar organizations also were invited to join.
The unique needs of servicewomen led to a new Kappa wartime focus, the creation of service women's centers. After the first, a joint project of alumni in the USO, was opened in Des Moines, Iowa in 1942, center numbers expanded at a swift pace across the nation, usually in cooperation with the USO, the YWCA, corporations, and other Panhellenic groups. Local hotels and stores furnished center space equipped by Elizabeth Arden with powder rooms, which offered some of the amenities of home: bathing facilities, beauty parlors, dry cleaners, writing rooms with free stationery, libraries, music rooms, and sometimes overnight facilities. Each center displayed a Kappa coat of arms. Often, additional hospitality was provided officers and enlisted women in Kappa homes near the centers. In all, about 1,250 Kappa volunteers served more than 300,000 servicewomen at 14 servicewomen's centers at an investment of $14,000 by members. Just as it had done with the French relief project of World War I, Kappa Kappa Gamma attracted the praise and gratitude of European nations during World War II, this time because of tremendous service to England and Norway, as well as to France. As with the French Relief Project, the English project started with a well-known Kappa author living abroad, witnessing the ravages of war. The Nora Waln Fund for Refugee Children was started in 1940 at the suggestion of key editor Helen Bauer from the Beta Delta chapter at Michigan, when she learned that author Nora Waln from Beta Iota chapter at Swarthmore would not be permitted to leave war-torn England to speak at Kappa's 1940 convention. Helen proposed that the money budgeted to bring Nora to America be used instead as the start of a fund to be distributed to children and others in England who had been bombed out of their homes. The convention, with unanimous approval, increased the original sum threefold, and Nora began her work unceasing until the end of the war.
After the war was over and Nora felt her relief work in England complete, it continued in a wholly different and unexpected form. While on assignment for the Atlantic Monthly, she learned that many poor Norwegian babies had only newspapers for swaddling clothes, and immediately promised Kappa would create 5,000 layettes. Riva Shryock rose to the task of fulfilling Nora's promise, despite the fact that in 1945, many Kappas were still busy serving in hospitals, schools, and the armed services, and the flannel used to make layettes was scarce. At Riva's beckoning, Kappas enthusiastically joined the cause, and in 1946, when 25,000 yards of longed-for flannel was discovered, it was purchased by the fraternity. Associations then held marathon sewing bees, entering into their greatest cooperative effort of the war. Each layette included a complete set of baby clothes, other baby supplies, and a nightgown for the mother. With the aid of many outside volunteers, the first 2,000 layettes were delivered to Norway. In June of 1946, a second shipment arrived a month later and was displayed in Norwegian schools before its distribution.
The work of Kappas in war and war relief is well documented, but less documented, as it is with most of women's history, are the efforts of women who served directly in our armed services. There are four that we want to highlight tonight. Peggy Hill initiated at Beta Psi chapter at the University of Toronto in 1937. As a young doctor, Peggy was told by a supervisor, "I don't like working with women. They cry." Peggy wrote in her biography that he learned that I didn't cry. During World War II, Peggy served as a psychologist in the Canadian Women's Army Corps. Later, she attended medical school at the University of Toronto. Graduating at the top of her class, Peggy became the first female chief medical resident at Toronto General Hospital and the second ever female physician-in-chief of medicine at Women's College Hospital. Her pioneering work spearheaded the establishment of a rape and sexual assault center and the first birth control center in Toronto. In 1994, she was named to the Order of Canada.
Emily Gorman initiated a Psi chapter at Cornell in 1931 and was working as a teacher when she enlisted in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps during World War II. That act of service started a military career that lasted 24 years, including achieving the rank of colonel and serving as the director of the United States Women's Army Corps. When Emily joined the Corps, there were only 4 jobs open to women. While at the helm of the organization and as an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, she opened hundreds of positions to women and advocated for military housing that provided the security and privacy needed by female soldiers. After her return to civilian life in 1966, Emily was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal.
Our next one is Mary Sproul, initiated at the Gamma Chi chapter at George Washington University in 1927. After completing a master's degree in biology, Mary conducted research on blood plasma, focusing on efficient and safe storage of donated blood. In 1942, she tried to join the U.S. Navy's newly formed Waves, but the Surgeon General told Mary he couldn't spare her. Later that year, she was commissioned as a lieutenant and continued her work in blood research. By 1950, she became the Navy's first female medical officer. As a commander during the Korean War, she flew to combat zones to oversee shipments of blood and collaborated with top U.S. doctors to improve the transport of whole blood in plastic because of its light weight. After the war, Mary worked to develop frozen blood products, and her research is still cited today.
And last but not least, June Braun Bent, initiated at the Gamma Theta chapter at Drake University in 1931. She had been working as a legal secretary in Des Moines, Iowa, when she decided her life could use a little more excitement. Years earlier, she loaned money to a cousin who worked at a local flight school. She phoned him one day in 1941 with a bold idea. He could repay his debt by setting her up with flying lessons. They called me the flying secretary, she said in 2009 interview, but that they didn't deter her from using her new piloting skills to help win World War II. June had just 35 hours of cockpit time and one solo flight to her name, but she was chosen as one of 1,101 women selected from a pool of nearly 25,000 applicants to be women Air Force service pilots. The first woman ever to fly U.S. military aircraft, flying non-combat missions from 1943 to 1944.
June was assigned to an air base in Sweetwater, Texas. June began advanced instrument training there. When a new aircraft needed a test flight or an older plane had to be checked after repair work, she took to the cockpit. Whether it was a fighter jet, a cargo plane, or a B-26 Marauder, known as the Widowmaker due to its reputation for crashing on takeoff, WASPs like June made sure each airplane was safe enough for male pilots to use in overseas combat. She said it was like being a guinea pig. That was part of the fun. In a 2010 interview with The Key, June revealed that she and her fellow WASPs flew dozens of 15 to 20-minute test flights each day. They were troubleshooting and reporting any service needs to the crews on the ground. She said, "You did it every day, like pounding a typewriter. You just took your turn and tested the plane." June says servicemen on base didn't know how to handle these women pilots. Sometimes they were unsure of the correct protocol on whether or not to salute a woman. Other times they made crude remarks. June says she was too busy to care. She said, "We proved women could be taught to fly the same as men."
Many women lost their husbands during World War II, but June found hers. Jack Bent was a fighter pilot who had just returned from flying combat missions in North Africa. He noticed June while she was sitting with a friend at an Air Force base in Merced, California. He asked, "May I sit with you?" June recalled. Nearly 3 months later, in July of 1944, they were married in their uniforms at the chapel on base. June said that she didn't have any civilian clothes with her, so the first thing she did on her honeymoon was buy a purple suit a matching hat, and black suede sandals. WASPs were considered civilians even though they had similar training as men cadets. They served alongside. They received none of the benefits due to other U.S. service members. 38 WASPs were killed in service, and each of their families had to pay to bring their bodies home for burial. No flags were draped over their coffin. As World War II began to wind down, the WASP program was officially canceled in December of 1944. June and her band of female flyers were released from duty. They had to pay their own bus fare home.
It is unbelievable that the Women's Air Force service pilots weren't recognized as U.S. veterans until 1977. But finally, in March 2010, this group of brave women was honored with the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest accolade a U.S. civilian can receive. June, at the age of 92, was on hand to receive her medal alongside 200 fellow women Air Force service pilots, or WASPs, and their families. She said, "Nobody thought about awards when we were doing this." She clutched a framed photograph of her friend Doris Duncan Muse, who died while in WASP service. And then she said, "We just thought about the feeling of being able to fly those great airplanes." Those are incredible stories. We had a few questions from folks wondering if this program was going to highlight our current service members. Though we only cover the historical stuff, we hope that there is a program sometime that shares about the service of our current members. So if you are currently serving, be sure to share your experiences so that your story is preserved for future generations and programs like this one.